Hi, welcome. I'm so glad that you're joining me here today for another talk. I'm Gina Tabrizi, licensed marriage and family therapist, and these talks are intended to just be a guide to give you some information, maybe inspire you, or a little help. If you're seeking more help or needing more help, of course, a therapist is someone you can always go to get additional guidance. If you're suffering issues like depression or anxiety or post-traumatic stress. So these talks are just an invitation for you to learn, to take in new information, and help you to work on things that you might need to be working on in your daily life. Today I had the thought of when loving you is hurting me. Oftentimes you'll hear this word codependency. It is a word that's been used in my industry in the field of psychology and in the field of drug and alcohol treatment quite a bit. And in the layperson's world, you may or may not have heard about codependency, but if you haven't, you've probably been in relationships or heard about relationships where it's like you love the person more than they love you, or you love them to a fault, or you have that friend that's in relationship with somebody who really treats them poorly, maybe disregards them, maybe doesn't follow through with commitments, maybe even cheats on them. And you look at your friend like they're nuts, like, why do you keep showing up for this? Like, why are you allowing this in your life? And maybe you've been that person in relationship and you have that burning thought, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep choosing people who give me less than what I want, need, or deserve? So this is a pattern of emotional immaturity that we call codependency, where you give more in relationship than others are giving to you, but also you give to a fault. You give to the point that you're harming yourself. You're risking your own health, your time, your talent, your treasure, all the things that you have to offer, you're giving away, trying to make up for, and trying to get someone else to love and validate you. Maybe you grew up in a home where people didn't validate you. Maybe you were seen and not heard. Maybe your parents weren't that available. Maybe your parents were always pushing you to do right and thrive and achieve things, but they never just said, hey, you're doing a good job. Or they forgot to mention it. They just kept pushing you. You can do better. You can do more. You can get an A+ instead of an A. I don't know about you. I had a little bit of that in my home. And sometimes that creates a pattern of perfectionism, where we think as people, we have to do everything perfect and everything 100%. And we're missing the big picture. We're human beings. We are never going to get it 100% right. We are always going to falter. We have flaws, and we're not always going to do the right thing, even though we intend to do the right thing, because we're human beings. We're imperfect beings. And so that's part of accepting this dynamic that occurs in relationship with other people, because codependents tend to deal with and struggle with perfectionism. They are trying to get it 100% right. If I do everything right, then this person's going to love me. So I want you to ask yourself now, do you find yourself in relationship, be it with friends, be it with colleagues, be it with a lover, be it with a spouse, where you're feeling like, oh my God, no matter what I do, I can't get it right. I can't get it 100%. And this person is always there to let me know how I'm just not cutting it, just not cutting the mustard. See, codependents will choose people whose esteem and whose self-worth is also damaged. So let me try to say that again. You're going to choose someone whose self-esteem and self-worth is also damaged. Now, that person might have another issue. They might have an issue of narcissism or an ego that's overinflated. They may not be that fabulous, but they know how to fake it, and they know how to act as if they are so wonderful. See, their pattern is about putting you down to make themselves feel better. So I want you to think for a moment who in your life and what relationships you've had where someone else treats you like no matter what you do, they always remind you that it wasn't enough and you're not good enough, and they put you down and they criticize you. Oh yeah, that was a nice dinner, but I wish I would have had a steak instead of a chicken. So look at when you're in relationship with people who want to diminish you in some way and notice how it makes you feel. See, for codependents, we feel guilt. We feel guilty about, oh my God, I didn't get it right. And then over time, we start to feel shame, like, what's wrong with me? Am I defective? Why is it that this keeps happening with this person? And why do I feel so bad about myself? I want you to think about, how did you feel prior to entering the relationship? Did you question your self-esteem? Did you feel like I'm not a good enough person? Because if you carried that into the relationship, then you just chose someone who could put a spotlight on your self-esteem, your injured self-esteem, and your lack of self-worth. And if you didn't notice it before and suddenly you've noticed it, you might be repeating a pattern that was repeated in your home. So watching your parents and their relationship, you start to identify with one of those parents, and on an unconscious level, then you repeat the same pattern. If you had a mom who was super codependent with your dad, or a dad who was super codependent with your mom, if dad was always right and mom was always wrong, or vice versa, and now you find yourself doing that, it's an imprinting. It's something that you learn because you watched it growing up, but it certainly doesn't have to be who you are. But if you've adopted it as who you are, that to the point where you start to say to yourself, I really don't think I'm good enough, or maybe there seriously is something wrong with me, then I want you to stop there. I want you to stop there and pause and say, look, I may have adopted some maladaptive behaviors and I'm repeating them and I'm acting them out in this relationship, but I'm aware of it. I am painfully aware of it, which means maybe I'm one step ahead of my history, of my parents, of other past relationships I've done this in, because nothing will change until you become aware of it. You can make excuse after excuse after excuse for yourself, but when you become aware that you're doing something in relationship that's causing you pain, or you're in a painful relationship with a partner, then it's your responsibility to take action. If you don't change it, nothing will change. This pattern will continue. See, because as a codependent, and the word codependency, let me pause here for a minute, is a dependency on someone else, codependent. The original term was used to describe a person who was in relationship with an addict or an alcoholic. So they had a dependency to substances and you had a dependency to them. Codependent. Make sense? So in this pattern, understand it from that sense. We found out that many people have similar patterns who are not in relationships with addicts and alcoholics because they were in a home where there was a parent who was a little bit more controlling or angry, or maybe there was a parent who was an addict and the other parent was enabling them, and you learn that pattern of behavior and now you have the codependency too. So you stop yourself when you recognize it and you become aware of it. That is the time to say, I can do something different. I'm not doomed to repeat the past just because it's what I've been doing, just because it's the only thing that I know. You can change that by start to identify the feelings. If I'm sitting here in this relationship and everything I'm doing genuinely from my heart, 100%, is to bring me closer to this person, is to express love, is to be connected, and it keeps being rejected, then I need to look at myself. Why am I committing to someone who doesn't commit to me in the same way? Why am I committing to someone who keeps rejecting me? Why am I committing to someone who keeps turning their back on me? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this to myself? And then notice how it makes you feel. It makes you feel lonely. It makes you feel insecure. It makes you feel unlovable. And if you sit in those feelings long enough, you're going to start to feel crazy. And a lot of times we do feel crazy in relationship with someone where we know we're giving 100% and they keep telling us, yeah, you're giving about 20. See, that other person is doing that so that they can control the relationship and stay in the position of power. They're also doing that because their self-esteem, as I mentioned earlier, is wounded. Their belief is also that they're not good enough. So what they do is they put you down, they bring you down to bring themselves up. And there's an expression that I learned a long time ago in my recovery from codependency, which is, if I'm okay with me, I have no need to make you wrong. So if you're in a relationship with someone who's always making you wrong, it means they're not okay with themselves. So start to say to yourself, wow, maybe it's not me. Not that you maybe aren't doing some things and you're not contributing, but go, wow, if this person is always making me wrong, it's a projection. It's like taking what I'm experiencing that I don't want to deal with and throwing it on you and labeling you with my bad self-esteem and go, wow, they're always doing this to me. Well, maybe it's because they're not okay. Maybe it's because they're not working on themselves. Maybe it's because they're not dealing with their insecurities or their past history. So what's your job? Your job is to free yourself from the burden of codependency, to know that you are not here to help someone else heal their psychological trauma. You're not here to help someone else to mend their self-esteem. If you find yourself in relationship with someone who's broken in those areas, you can love them to death and they may never change. In a loving relationship, you would point out to your partner and say, I think you need to work on this because you not working on this is now causing a division in our relationship. And I want, as long as you're working on it, I'm willing to commit and maybe see this through. But if I'm the only one doing the work, then I have to check myself and I have to look at whether the expiration date on this relationship has arrived or not. Hopefully that makes sense to you. But if it doesn't make sense, go back and rewatch this and watch it slowly and you'll get it, because really codependency is about giving too much to a person who isn't capable of receiving it. It's great that you want to love, it's great that you want to take care of and nurture other people, but if you're doing it to the point that you're using all your financial resources, or you're exhausted all the time, or you're running around like a chicken with its head cut off trying to please this person, whether you're doing it through buying gifts or doing it through keeping the house clean, keeping the finances straight, just changing your world. Every time you want to do something or you want to plan something for yourself, plan occasions to maybe go on vacation or hang out with friends or go visit your family, and it gets interrupted by this other person's needs because their needs are always first, and you keep canceling things in your life to make sure that they're okay, then that's a huge sign of codependency. That's a red flag for you. So I want you to notice and take an inventory. What are my red flags? Am I giving more than what I'm receiving? Am I always hearing that I'm not getting it right? Am I always hearing that I'm not good enough? Is this person always measuring me to some other yardstick, whether that's someone in their past or maybe it's a parent of theirs? Maybe they're measuring you to a parent. They had this ideal, perfect parent, and they're always saying, oh, my dad would always do it like this, and you don't do it like that. This is a problem because you're who you are. You are uniquely you, and you are not meant to be anybody else. And if someone is trying to paint you with a brush so that you become someone different, then you really need to look at the toxicity and the dysfunction of that relationship, because it'll never be healthy for you. If you cannot fully be yourself in a relationship and be embraced and held and regarded and loved, in spite of whatever your flaws are, you're really not in the relationship that's ever going to work for you. And so it's important, I think, that you take that inventory. And I know for me it was critical, because in my first marriage, and I'll share that with you, I did that. I chose a relationship where I was brutally codependent to the point of completely obliterating my self-esteem to where I barely would talk or function outside of just a robot, doing whatever I had to do just to get through life, and always feeling like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sometimes in codependency, you'll be in relationship with people that are very abusive. So now that's taking codependency to a whole other level. That's recreating a traumatic pattern in your life that can cause you so much psychological damage. And if it's a physically abusive relationship, obviously physical damage and spiritual damage. So I want you to think about, why am I staying somewhere where I'm being treated so poorly? Why am I staying somewhere where someone disregards me and disrespects me to this extent, to where it's causing me so much pain? Because in abusive relationships, it is never okay, and it is never your fault when someone else loses control. They can say, I'm so angry because you didn't pick up the dog mess, or you didn't pay that bill, or I'm so angry that you're late and you embarrassed me at my company thing. They can point fingers at you because you have some part in something that has upset them. But for them to then abuse you verbally or physically is a line that they've crossed, that they are fully responsible for, and it has nothing to do with you. Someone losing control over their temper where they are abusive is a problem that they must own. That is not your problem. You can't make someone abuse you. They are already an abuser. But what you do as the codependent is you recognize I am being abused, and abuse is not something that I've earned nor that I deserve. It is very important for you to stop that pattern, because you will find yourself becoming suicidal or depressed or isolating from family and friends, because you wind up being sucked into this pattern with this abusive person, and then you're entrapped. You will feel like you're in prison and that you can't get out, and that's a place that nobody deserves. Know right now that you deserve to live in a loving and healthy relationship. We all do. Know right now that no matter what your imperfections are, that as long as you're honest, as long as you're willing to work on them and change, your partner, whoever that partner is, should respect that, should give you the opportunity to change, and should applaud you for doing the work that you're doing to grow. No one should ever make you feel bad about yourself because you're not 100%, because we're never always going to be 100%. As I said earlier, because we're human beings. So take this inventory, notice the red flags in your relationship, as I mentioned earlier, and say to yourself, just for today, I'm going to notice that if I'm in a pattern of a relationship where I feel less than, where I feel nothing I do measures up, where I feel that I'm not being regarded and I'm not receiving the love that I'm giving, that I need to look at my codependent patterns, and I'm willing to do that, and I'm willing to stop them. And one way to stop them is to confront the other person and to say, this is no longer about me, because I'm doing the work, I'm showing up, I'm meeting all the needs that you've asked, and yet you keep moving the bar. It's never enough, it's never good enough. You keep pushing that bar further and further, and I feel I can't reach it, and I now know that's your problem, not mine. It's a very simple way to directly confront one of the patterns in the relationship and codependency. And the other one is to just simply state the feelings that you're experiencing. I feel with you in this relationship that I'm never enough and that I'm never going to be enough. And that's not something I want to continue to live with. So I'm looking at my part, I need you to look at yours. And if you're not willing to look at yours, then I need to look at whether this relationship has expired or not. So I want to thank you again for being here. I hope you learned something about relationship and when loving you is hurting me. Again, it's Gina Tabrizi, licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'll see you soon.